Okay, so I want to just go over some of the poems, in addition to the ones that are in chapter 2 that I included on Canvas. Um, and again, to remind you, a metaphor asserts a correlation or resemblance between two things that are otherwise unrelated. Okay, the English word metaphor originates from the Greek metaphora, which means to transfer or to carry over. A metaphor transfers meaning from one subject onto another so that the target subject can be understood in a new way. Okay, so it's a form of comparison, and um, and I like the idea of it kind of transferring or carrying over meaning. And often, two unlike things are compared. You wouldn't normally think of one thing in relation to the other, but the writer makes a case for it so that it's clear. So let's look at What the Mirror Said by Lucille Clifton. And a few things to point out. It's a poem that's, she's using metaphor, and she's also using anaphora, the repetition of a phrase. She has listen, listen, listen 3 times. And I think that's significant in this poem because think about the title, What the Mirror Said. Um, the speaker is looking into the mirror, and we know that mirrors don't really talk. So I read this poem as the speaker kind of giving herself a pep talk. And in a way, right, if you need somebody to listen, if you need to listen to yourself or you're not always so sure of something, you might need to repeat it. Listen, you a wonder, you a city of a woman. That's where she introduces the metaphor, okay, right? She doesn't say, listen, you a lilac bush, or listen, you a you a streetcar, right? Listen, you a wonder, you a city of a woman. And then she takes that metaphor of city and kind of thinks about, well, what are some things that are related to a city? And you could go many directions, right? She could have said, you got bars broken down and windows bashed out, or you got traffic lights that are all red, you're keeping people away, or you got your gates all shut up. But instead she says, you got a geography of your own. Listen, somebody need a map to understand you. Somebody need directions to move around you. So you kind of like, how would you interpret that? If you got a geography, what's the equivalent of having a geography? You have your own lay of the land, your own body, your own, you're composed of different parts of your body and different parts of your personality. Somebody need a map to understand you. Does that mean you're complicated? Somebody need directions to move around you. So you got to kind of think about how would you interpret these forms of comparison that are extending the metaphor. And by the end, she's saying, you not a no place anonymous girl. In the fact that she says, you not a no place, to me, it suggests that somebody told her that maybe she was, or treated her like she was anonymous and didn't matter. And she's saying, you not a no place anonymous girl. Mister with his hands on you, he got his hands on some damn body. And she chooses to put those words separate on the line to emphasize them. And it's written in the kind of black, kind of urban vernacular, right? It's like, you not a no place anonymous girl. And it's got a kind of, distinctive voice and attitude. And this speaker is telling herself what she needs to hear to boost her confidence, maybe, and to suggest that maybe she wasn't treated so great at one point, and she needs to remind herself that she is worth something. Okay. And Four Daughters by Lucille Clifton, you could read. So she's got metaphors, and she doesn't have one central metaphor like in What the Mirror Said. Is the central metaphor is the city, and she all her kind of forms of comparison extend that to different aspects of a city that correlate to her. But in Four Daughters, she says, I am the sieve she strains from. That's one metaphor, right? Little by little every day. A new one, I am the rind she is discarding. Another one, I am the riddle she is trying to answer. Something is moving in the water. She is the hook. I am the line. And the title, you could take it like, who's the speaker? Is the speaker the daughter telling the mother, I am the sieve she strains from? Does the daughter feel like the mother strains from her? Or is it the mother she perceives each daughter differently? Like she compares each daughter to something different that she feels. And that's the way I read this poem. Like, I think one of the daughters, maybe the mother thinks of the daughter as the daughter sees herself as the mother. The daughter sees the mother this way. um, the mother says, I am the sieve she strains from, little by little every day. So if somebody's straining from you, if you're a sieve, I would say you're getting something valuable maybe from somebody, right? You're straining, you're taking what you want, the best of it. If somebody sees you as I am the rind she is discarding, right? You'd be like, whoa, she doesn't see much use for me right now. Now these could be different stages. Maybe the daughters are at different ages, right? Because you can change your perception of a parent as you get older. Sometimes you see them differently when you're younger than when you're older. And then this one, I'm the riddle she is trying to answer. Like maybe this is one daughter doesn't quite get her mother, right? It's like she still hasn't figured her out. And then something is moving in the water. She is the hook. I am the line, right? You can't, if you just had a hook, it would sink. If you just had a line, you wouldn't catch anything. So they're more working together, right? There's a symbiotic relationship. And so maybe that's the most mature one, like still, they're now collaborating, cooperating. So it's something you could do. Like you could think about yourself in relation to a parent or somebody significant in your life, and who would you be in relation to them? You know, I am the grass they spread out on and relax in the sun, or I am the blanket they wrap themselves in, or I am the cabinet they shut me away in. Like so there's different depending on how you think the person sees you, how you see them. I put Homage to My Hips, another Lucille Clifton poem in here because of there's a writing exercise that relates to it. But this is really, she's personifying her hips. And I love, like, she's got some great assonance in this poem. And one particular example is right here, like when she's saying these hips are big hips, they need space to move around. And then when she says they don't fit into little petty places. I love that because it's like the short I is like a tight little short little place. And she's saying these hips don't fit into little petty places. And I like that alliteration too. And then from there she goes, these hips are free hips. They don't like to be held back. These hips have never been enslaved. And Lucille Clifton's African American writer, and she's in her speaker. You might say, like, this is an African American woman who's like proud of her hips and her body that's larger than like typical cultural standards. And given the history of enslavement, she's saying these hips have never been enslaved. They go where they want to go. They do what they want to do. These hips are mighty hips. These hips are magic hips. I have known them to put a spell on a man and spin him like a top. So I feel like it's a very empowering poem. She's embracing her body, her hips especially, and she's personifying them so that you feel like they actually have this agency and they even are kind of like supernatural. They can put a spell on a man and spin him like a top. In Paper Matches by Paulette Jiles, and this poem was written in the early 70s when the feminist movement was kind of coming more into the mainstream culture. And I think of this as the speaker is a younger woman because she's watching her aunts, my aunts, so she's like the niece of them, a different generation, and she's not so happy with the status quo, right? And she's probably been influenced at the time saying like, what's going on with the gender? Like, why are women relegated always to housework and to the kitchen, and the men kind of get away with a lot? And so that's what the poem, my aunts washed dishes while the uncles squirted each other on the lawn with garden hoses. Why are we in here? I said. And they are out there. That's the way it is, said Aunt Hetty, the shriveled up one. Kind of like the cost of having like kind of just accepted the status quo and been like the one who has to be stuck in the kitchen forever. She shriveled up over the years. And then the speaker says, I have the rages that small animals have. Being small, being animal. Written on me was a message, at your service, like a book of paper matches. One by one we were taken out and struck. We come bearing supper, our heads on fire. This is such a great metaphor. Like, we don't see paper matches so much anymore in our culture, but to think of herself as like written on me was a message at your service. So it's like sometimes the paper matches would have like something written on the cover of them. And she was like, and then she takes that idea of like the match just being used, being struck. And then, but it's struck. And once it's struck, there's a flame that bursts out of it. And so I love to picture like a row of matches with these like little flames as heads. We come bearing supper, our heads on fire. Like they're just so furious. I love that. And then Sex Without Love by Sharon Olds. this metaphor, like so it's this metaphor of like, how do they do it, the ones who make love without love? She begins by posing a question, and then she gives a comparison. They're beautiful as dancers, gliding over each other like ice skaters over ice. Okay, that's kind of a cold image, right? And it's like frozen, like they're like ice skaters gliding over one another like ice. And this is making love, and yet there's something very smooth and very how would you say, like, how would you just characterize that? But then she's got fingers hooked inside each other's bodies, faces red as steak, wine, wet as the children at birth whose mothers are going to give them away. What do you make of these, like, these kind of unexpected, surprising comparisons? They're very carnal on one hand. Their fingers are hooked inside each other's bodies, and their faces are red as steak and wine, and but wet as the children at birth whose mothers are going to give them away. Like, there's a lack of investment or attachment, right? It's like they're just doing this. How do they? And then she says, how do they come to the God, come to the still waters, and not love the one who came there with them? So she's really using like that. It's almost like a slightly kind of almost like a foreplay or orgasmic kind of like pausing, and this aeration that she uses, these kind of spaces within the line. And she's asking this question: how do they come to this place, right? And there's a pun there too. How do they do it without really loving the one who came there with them? There's something in the voice here though that feels like she kind of admires it, but she doesn't understand it too. There's something cold about this whole thing, almost like lovemaking as like going on a treadmill or a recumbent bike or something. It's just something they are able to do. But yet she's giving it a more elevated. She's saying, how do they come there with them light rising slowly as steam off their joined skin? These two bodies together. These are the true religious, the purists, the pros, the ones who will not accept a false messiah, love the priest instead of the God. They do not mistake the lover for their own pleasure. So, she's saying, like, in a way, there's an illusion. She's saying when so you're making love with someone, but really you're after your own pleasure. Is that what she's saying? And they don't mistake it, right? They are the ones who will not accept a false messiah. They will not love the priest instead of the God. Like, they are going for it. And then they are like the great runners. And so she switches the metaphor again. They know they are alone with the road surface, the cold, the wind, the fit of their shoes, their overall cardiovascular health, just factors like the partner in the bed, and not the truth, which is the single body alone in the universe against its own best time. Wow. And just the idea of like that, even if you're with someone and even if you're sharing what most people would say is an intimate exchange and relationship, she's saying, well, really, we are always alone. And then she uses that against our own best time, like we're all mortal, we're all going to die eventually. And those who are just able to kind of go for it and embrace the pleasure of it without getting too wrapped up in the other person and the emotion of it, is in a way that there's more truth. It's more honest in a way, is what she's saying in this poem, Sex Without Love. So I just wanted to go over those in case you don't join us on WebEx. And I hope you enjoyed the chapter 2 and that you will enjoy the exercises. There's a whole bunch of different exercises that you can choose from in writing a poem where you include a metaphor and extend the metaphor. Okay.